Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Nanette Kennedy with Humanities Team and Evolution Revolution. And we are reading Conversations with God, Book 3 by Neale Donald Walsch. And last week, we took the whole hour and read. It's a long chapter. And so we decided that this week, we would discuss things we want to discuss in the chapter. So I am going to. One of the things I had in the very beginning of chapter 12 that I just put a star next to is when God is talking and says, "My dearest beings, I've always been in your hearts. I'm only glad you can actually feel me there. I have always been with you. I have never left you. I am you and you are me, and we shall never be separated ever, because that's not possible." And the reason and then we've read similar things. I don't know if it's in this book or book 2 or book 1, but that's something like I need to have on my mirror in the bathroom. That just, if I'm having a down day or whatever, is I just need to realize it's not possible for me to be separate from God. And then when Neale says, "Yet on some days I feel so terribly alone. At some moments I feel that I'm fighting this battle by myself." And God says, "That's because you have left me, my child. You have abandoned your awareness of me. Yet where there is awareness of me, you can never be alone." And that really resonated with me, because I'm sure we all have a moment or two here and there where we go, I feel like I'm alone. But I will also say, because I've been on my journey for a long time, I don't stay there for very long, because I just don't. It's like if I have one of those hiccups where I'm feeling all alone, it just goes away. And yesterday, one of my longest friends forever, we've been friends for about 40 years, she called me yesterday morning and told me that her older sister had died. And I could feel that feeling that I was reminding my friend that she wasn't alone, even through me. And as it is with anybody who crosses over, it was in my head all day long. And I was just shooting love to my friend and the rest of her family. And I think that's one of the ways that we can, the God that's within us can help other people too. And anyway, so does anybody else have anything to say with the beginning parts of this chapter?
Just something about the aloneness. It's a different aspect of it. But I just started, which I'm very happy about, the first 2 conversations with God groups in Scotland. And a couple of people came who said they felt very alone with their understanding of conversations with God in the early days, because they didn't meet with anybody who felt the same. And they met with a lot of people who thought that what they were reading wasn't okay. And so that's a different kind of aloneness, that you can be alone in your beliefs for a while.
So you do have a group that's meeting now?
Yeah.
That is really great. And so you guys are starting with book 1?
Well, Well, we're not quite doing it through the books. We're doing it with little readings jumping about.
Okay.
But it was just like people coming from such a long way away who said they hadn't met anybody who read these books for so long. And they're feeling alone with it.
Well, I think when you can discuss stuff like that in a group, and I know most of us on this phone call, or all of us, we've surrounded ourselves with people who, well, we surrounded ourselves with people that believe like we do. And I know when I read book 1 for the first time, I would be thinking, well, that's what I think, or I'd read something and I'd go, well, I could have written that part. And it resonated with me so much that I I felt alone in being on that path at that time, because it was in 1995 or 4 or something. And I remember thinking, half the people I know are going to think I'm nuts. But I just started gathering more and more people around me that the book resonated with. Over.
Thanks, guys.
You're on mute. There you go.
How did you find these people, Sarah?
I think I just sort of attracted them. I put a little advert in a little local magazine, and they just
Put an
emailed me.
advert in what?
An advert in a magazine.
Okay. So how many have you got?
About 6.
That's huge. They must be thrilled.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Is that the same thing in Scotland, that the churches are losing the congregation, that they're diminishing? Is it the same there?
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
So this is something which is wider, non-denominational.
Mm.
Oh, I'm so happy for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there must be a new energy generated.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's going away a bit from what this chapter is about, but it's just when Nanette said about loneliness. And
I'm just so happy for you.
thank you.
Yep. That's really, really cool. And I think and it does tie into this, because it says, when you feel alone, and then when you said you attracted these people to you, excuse me, and really, and it brings in this question of churches diminishing in their congregations. In fact, I don't know who I was talking to about this about a week ago, but we were talking about the fact, the churches are going to have to come around to where they're saying, we accept everybody, we don't judge people, and if they don't, their congregations are going to just keep depleting. And there's a Unity Church here in the town I live in, and they have this bunch of banners on their lawn that say, all are welcome, Muslims, blacks, Jews, Christians, and it's so refreshing to see. And my son and I were running a couple errands yesterday, and we were noticing the marquees on some of these churches are saying, all are welcome. Some of them say things like, wear your Birkenstocks, Jesus did, So they're putting humor and inclusivity, that all are welcome, and I think that's really important. Whether it's a book group or whether it's a church, and the churches here in the United States that are Catholic churches, they're going to have to let priests get married. They're just going to have to do that eventually. And they're going to have to ease the reins up on some of the beliefs that are dictated. But you can also, here in the United States, you can shop around and find a church that you like, that doesn't make you go, ah. So I think churches, generally speaking, are getting to a point where they know they're going to be alone. They're not going to, it's not going to work if, just like the microcosm and the macrocosm, if the planet doesn't realize that we need to get along, we're never going to be getting along. And just moving that over to the churches, if they can't figure out that they need to live what they preach, which is always something that gets me when and I don't go to church that often, but I'll hear a sermon and I'll be like, you're saying the right words, but anyway.
I've just got something to say to that, Nanette. First of all, my video is broken again. Yeah, but I think God has a tremendous sense of humor that the lack of funds makes them want to include Muslims and blacks. I mean, that's pretty desperate.
Yep.
I mean, they're going to have to practice what they preach, if only to fill the pews. And if it means blacks and Muslims, well, shit, come on in, guys.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because I almost said practice what you preach. And it's so important that, as a person on this planet, you've got to just say all are welcome and treat each other like that in the streets, in the stores. I'm always the one bending over and helping somebody pick up something. And it's happened several times. One time was catastrophic. I think I've told this on this call before, but this young kid pulled a lemon out of the bottom of the display of lemons, and they went everywhere. And he was mortified. And I said, happens to everybody, and just stop and help. And then I love it when something similar happens to me. Like somebody will say, do you want my grocery cart? And I'll say, yeah, I'd love to have your grocery cart, and they're just, it's the do unto others, and every philosophy and religion on the planet has that, some form of that in their, I don't want to say in their religion, but it says it somewhere in whatever book they study, or they have a banner that says it. And I've written a post on Facebook before where I said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I just looked down, and it's on the page I'm looking at in the book, the chapter we're reading. Neil says, thank you. Yes, you have given me that clue before. Be the source, whatever you want to experience in yourself. You have said, be the source of it in the lives of others. And God says, yes, this is a great secret. That is the sacred wisdom. Do unto others as you would have it done unto you. And I posted on my Facebook page, is it just a platitude? Is it just something, it sounds good, but nobody practices it? I think if more of us practice this, it'd be good.
People are too caught up in judgment at the moment. You know, we've become a society of people that, for the most part, don't realize that it all starts within us. And instead, we spend all our time looking externally and judging other people, you know, believing that we're somehow separate and superior. It's, but I wanted to go back and just speak to the aloneness for a minute. So, and I know I've mentioned this in the past on these calls, but because I came out of my mother fully awake and aware, I've always felt alone. And even here in Alaska, I have my husband and I have a handful, and I mean a handful, that are like-minded people. And then the rest of them are still asleep. So I feel alone a lot. In fact, even some of our close friends, we have a friend that comes over and he's all about lack and scarcity. And he's always going off. I mean, and he's very politically minded. So he's always going off on these issues of, oh, there's not enough time for this and we have to hurry up and do this and blah, blah, blah. And I'll say stuff and he'll just look at me like I'm a lunatic. And I'll just say, it's okay, Russ. You can't see me. It's okay. I know you can't see me. I shouldn't have even opened my mouth. Because really, whenever I do that, it really just causes, I mean, I find myself in these situations where, because I have such a radically different viewpoint, I'll try and share it. And then I can just see it's like I just talked to a stone wall, and I just have to just let it go. It's like, it's okay. If what I just said doesn't make any sense to you, it's okay. It's okay. But I totally understand the feeling alone, because very few people truly understand these concepts. Very few people.
You know, I think too, Linda, that, and I wish I could remember what it was I'd said to one of my sisters. But I said, oh, you know what it was I said to her? I said, God doesn't want anything from you. And she's very open-minded, but that threw her for a little bit of a loop. And so I get that part, even with family sometimes. You say something and they look at you. What I see is an electric garage door shutting. It's like uh-oh, wait, I lost you. You know, Wayne Dyer was real. Yeah, I was just going to say something real quick. Wayne Dyer always had a really good sense of humor in his books. And he would just say these funny things that, you know, somebody asked him, well, how can you say you're never going to get Alzheimer's? He goes, because I'm choosing not to get it. And so a woman raised her hand in this group and said, well, how do you know that? And just how can you know that? And she says, and if you have Alzheimer's, you won't know you have Alzheimer's. He goes, and she says, or he says, well, I'll get to meet a lot of new people every day. It's just so. It's our outlook too. You were going to say, Sarah?
I was only going to say that going back to the later part of this chapter, what I would call maybe the slightly more difficult part of this chapter, about relationships and open relationships and being loyal to one person for all of your life. I think this could be quite a challenging chapter for people who maybe are more traditional in their thinking. And I don't know if people have thoughts about this when they reread it during the week, but quite challenging.
I think it is, and I think it. And thank you, Shabana. We are imagining your giant smile. I think because even when we were getting towards the end, or getting towards the end of the chapter last week as a group, and Christine Glenn said she had some real questions because she's a pretty good one who doesn't have a lot of questions, and that's why I was really hoping she would show up today. But I think that's why when Linda was reading last week, I was really drawn in, and I looked up at the clock and saw that it was 45 minutes after the hour, and I thought, should I stop her? Should I? But it was just such a compelling read, and I did make notes, little asterisks and stuff, and something interesting aside from the material. When you read the part, Linda, that said, I'm saying what I said through Helen Schuchman in A Course in Miracles. My book says Helen Schuchman. Your copy says somebody's name that I don't recognize, but I'm not real familiar with the person who wrote down The Course in Miracles. But it was just an interesting thing.
Well, that could have just been me mispronouncing it.
No, it was a completely different name.
Here's the name. I'm putting it in the, well, I'm trying to put it in the chat. Well, it won't let me put it in the chat box. Huh.
That's weird.
It's Judith, and then it's Schucman.
Okay, so the last name is the same, but in my book it says Helen. Yours it says Judith.
Oh.
So I don't.
That's
I guess
interesting.
one
Let's
of those.
just it's Helen, Bill Tetford, and Ken Wapnick.
So name is it neither
They
of
were
us?
Yeah, Helen Schuchman, Bill Tetford, and Ken Wapnick they were the editors. Author. There is no author ascribed to ACIM, although it was scribed by Helen.
Okay.
So it was Helen, not Janet. So there are a few typos in this PDF version of this book that I've come across.
Like the fart, right?
Yes, like the fart. Yeah, like the fart. That was funny.
That was hilarious.
That was hilarious.
I have something funny to tell you about the open marriage business.
Oh, please.
What happened is that I found out very quickly about the state of my best friends' marriages once I was separated from my husband, because these women started to eye me with extreme suspicion. And I couldn't understand what it was about until I saw their husbands leering at me, because they figured that their husbands thought I was fair game now that I was single. And all I'm thinking is that they must have a pretty miserable relationship if any kind of distraction is so, eagerly sought by the husbands and so feared by the wives.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and I think this is one of the things Sarah was talking about a little while ago. I am a one woman or a one man woman or whatever I'm trying to say. For me, now I've been divorced, but while in relationship, I try to keep my relationship sacred. In my just because of the way it makes me feel. And frankly, I don't think I know anybody who's got an open marriage. I just, and if they do, I just don't know about it. So that was something I had a little trouble with.
I have a really funny story I can share when you're done.
Oh, please go.
About open marriages. Well, when I met my first husband, he was married, and his wife was having an affair with her boss. And I didn't want to be what broke up the marriage. You know, I was like, that's not me. I wanted him to be happy, and I wanted the best for him, but in my mind, the best for him would have been to repair his marriage. And so at one point, and this was, I should say, this was back in the early 80s when people actually were, like there had been a book that came out. And so his wife was wanting to rent out their basement as an apartment. And she seriously suggested to him that he ask me if I would like to live in the basement.
Oh my gosh.
And my question to him was, okay, where will you sleep? Are you going to sleep upstairs with her? Are you going to sleep downstairs with me? Or are you going to go up and down? Because if he were to have said, no, I would live downstairs in the basement with you, I might very well have said yes. But I couldn't handle the going up and down part. You know. It ended up that they split up and he and I ended up together, and I never lived in the basement, but I cleaned the basement after she moved out. But I never had to live in it. But I just always thought that was a really interesting thing for her to have suggested, because she wanted her cake and eat it too. So she didn't want to get divorced, but she really just wanted to go have this affair with this other guy, and that was her way, I think, of fixing it. Was, well, we stay married, but you have your and and I have mine.
Yeah, no.
No,
Nope, not gonna happen. When I was 21, 22, I tried a relationship like that. And it wasn't that the other person was living in the house. I lived in the house with this guy that I was madly in love with. But he had told me at the get-go he was going to see other people. And I loved him so much, I thought, I don't care. And after about a year, there's probably 8 months where he didn't see anybody else but me. And then he did start seeing other women. It was just too much. It was just way too much for me. And I said, when I finally, I don't know how much longer we were together, but I finally went to him and said, I love you so much. It's crazy. But I love myself this much more. And I said, I can't live like that. And I remember several times us getting together after I'd moved out And he'd say, if you could just deal with this open relationship thing. I said, I can't. It's just can't do it. And whatever God says here about it, maybe we're not mature enough or whatever. I guess my feet are entrenched firmly in the old-fashioned ground. So,
well, I think that we've really been led astray in society over these things, and I think that ultimately he's right. We should be much more like bonobo chimps than we are. Where love and compassion and emotional release through sex is used across the board, regardless of age, regardless of family units. I think we ultimately would be much happier if we were to find a way to that place of more open relationships. I think that what we've done is we've boxed ourselves into corners, and we've made it really difficult. Because there are a lot of people, I think, that don't. There are a lot of men. I know several men who've admitted to me that their constant thought, the thought that is always right here, first and foremost, is something to do with sex. 24/7. 24/7. And that the rest of the time they're having to constantly work at thinking about other things. And it would be so much easier for them to go through life if they weren't having to constantly, if all of us weren't having to constantly relegate our thoughts into, oh no, I can't, do that because I'm not married to that person, even though I'd really like to, and I can't do that because I'm not, I think that when we shake it all out, our structures of family could really be different. Much more expanded, much more open. Remember the earlier chapter where he was talking about, just because you're of childbearing age doesn't mean you're of child rearing mentality. If we were to take all of these pieces and put them into a working society where, yeah, you're young, you want to, you get, but the grandparents raise the children. And it's more of a, I don't know, it's more homogenized, I guess, maybe. I think that like the hang-ups that you have, I think you learned those. I don't think that it's in your cells to be that way. And if it's in your cells, it's just because there are cells that learn it from other lifetimes, I think if we could wipe the slate clean and start over, we could really come up with something much better way to live.
Yeah, I kind of agree, but I think we've set up this cultural norm that loyalty to one person is our gold standard, and the longer the better, and we're so much within it, really. Although there's that when you read, if you're a woman and you read this passage, you tend to think, oh, it's very convenient that Neil was a man and receiving this message. So we still got this male female dichotomy of it, I think. And to get out of that will be such a massive culture shift. But I do agree with you, Linda, basically. I do.
Yeah, it would be very different, but.
Well, let's look at it from what we were just talking about. People having affairs and this, that, and the other thing. If we were more open, the word affair wouldn't be attached to, just acting on your impulses. Unless, of course, it turned into an affair. Um, but while you were talking, Sarah, it just brings me to my story of, when I found out what sexual intercourse was. And I was, 10, and I was the oldest of 4 kids at the time. And my friend that I was spending the night with, she was the youngest of like 5 or 6 kids. So she knew all about it. And I didn't know anything about it. And she started telling me about the birds and the bees. And I was blown out of the water. I was like, I remember saying my parents would never do anything like that. And I called my mother, said, come get me. I'm not spending the night. She's no longer a friend of mine. And it wasn't that my parents were afraid to tell me about sex. They just didn't think 10 years old was the right age. And then when I got home and my mother forced me to tell her what had happened, she said, well, you need to sit down. and I'm going to tell you what's what here. And so she went through the thing of when people love each other and they, blah, 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 blah. But in my little head, it was strictly utilitarian. It wasn't something for pleasure because it just seemed so god awful to me. And then I remember when telling my son, my older son, and my daughter about where babies come from because I was pregnant with their youngest brother. My son just made me sweat. I mean, he didn't act like he knew a thing, and he was 11. And after my hairline, and I even told their dad, I said, you should be telling him this. And so after I finished sweating, my son started to giggle. And I said, what's so funny? He goes, I knew all that already. I was like, okay, well, thanks a lot. And when I told my daughter, however, she was on the floor with her hands like this. And we had just read this book called The Special Cuddle. And when we were finished reading it, she said, so, you've had sex with Dad one time because I adopted my 2 older kids. I said, not exactly. And then she just collapsed onto the floor and put her head down, and she goes, oh, that means Aunt Mary and Uncle Wayne have had sex 5 times. She was just counting children, and even this book was written really well. There's when 2 people really love each other, they have this special cuddle, and they can do it whenever they want to do it. But my daughter thought it correlated to how many children you had. But I think that's part of this whole thing is that as a parent, you don't know exactly what to say. And I remember when my son, my youngest son, came home like 10th grade or something. I said, Mom, I had sex with my girlfriend. I was like, I don't want to know. It's like, I'm happy for you. Don't need the details. I don't know how we get out of that pattern with our own kids.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I find it raises a lot of questions, this, for me, and some of the answers I don't really know.
Yep. Because I know that for me, growing up after I knew about sex, it was a real killjoy moment if I thought my parents were having sex in the next room. It was like, oh, I don't want to I don't want to picture that. And then as my kids got older and were starting to be sexually active, I thought, oh, I don't want to picture that. And it's a wonderful act. But for some reason, if it's your parents or your kids, it's sort of like, I don't know. I don't know what that is. And I think that's part of the reason we don't talk about it as adults with our kids. At least that's part of it for me. It's intimate. It's private. It's something. I don't know.
I was the result of an affair, and I knew it. I knew it when I was still in the womb. And when I was 6 months old, I tried to explain it to my dad that my mother was having an affair, but I was only 6 months old, and the only words I knew at that point were mama and dada. And she'd taken me to the airport to pick him up, and she taught me dada, and the plan was she was going to set me down and push me towards him as he was coming to me, and I was supposed to say dada dada and show him how I'd started talking, because he'd been gone for several weeks. And she set me down, and I went running towards him, and all I wanted to tell him was that there was this man that kept coming. And whenever he left town, there was this man that kept coming. And so instead of starting out with dada dada, I started out with mama mama, because I was like, mama mama, screwing around. But then I realized I don't know the rest of the words. I didn't have the rest of the words, and I was like, oh, darn. So I had to wait.
That's too funny. Sort of.
Yeah.
I know that has everybody here read Bridges of Madison County?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's not a terribly well written book, but it's got an interesting storyline. And my mom and I were talking about it. We were sitting in the car in the driveway. It was pouring down rain, and we were waiting for the rain to let up so we could get out of the car and go in the house. And my mom said, have you read Bridges of Madison County? I said, yeah. I thought it was wonderful. And part of the interesting storyline is that this affair this woman has, she's got, I think, 2 grown children. Or maybe they're not grown, but they're not around when she has this affair. And it's lasts for 2 or 3 days, and it's incredibly steamy and romantic, and it's everything she's not getting from her husband, and she falls in love in 3 days. And then the guy moves on, but for the rest of their living lives, he sends her notes or something and she puts them in a box. And then when her will is being read, the whereabouts of the box is uncovered, and the mother wants the 2 grown children to know that she had this other love in her life that was just so incredible. And so I'm saying to my mom, I said, I think it was beautiful. I think the whole thing was beautiful. And my mom said, so you think it's okay that she dies and then she tells her kids about this affair? I said, why not? She goes, well, let me tell you about George. And I was like, what? And she goes, how all right do you think it is now? I said, not as much, not so much. It's like, and she didn't have an affair with George, but my mother was very witty, and she would, like a fish, reel you in, reel you in, reel you in, and then all of a sudden you were there and you're snagged. Like, but I think this all goes to it's how we see things. And when you said you were the result of an affair, my my mother was 6 feet under when I found out that she and my dad had to get married. And she'd never, ever, 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 ever mentioned this. But my godmother was going through some of my mother's paperwork, and my godmother was my mom's best friend. And she goes, "Oh, look here, Nanette. It's your mom and dad's wedding or marriage license." And it says January 30th, 1956. And I had my head in the refrigerator, bonked the back of my head. I said, "Well, that can't be right." She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm born on June 11th. January 30th is like February 1st. There's no way I was that, premature." And I think I didn't think anything less of my mother. I looked up at the ceiling and I thought, God, talk about taking a secret to the grave. But it's all these things that we've been brought up. You shouldn't get pregnant before you're married, and you shouldn't have sex before you get married. And then to find out that my mother had battled all that to me, and come to find out that she wasn't married when she got pregnant with me. And I could care less, but it's just the thing that's like, but you taught us all, which we didn't obey, to reserve ourselves for our husbands, wives, whatever. So we just keep perpetuating the issue.
Yeah, there's a transparency that we need to get to as a humanity, as a species. And we need to get to it on all levels, not just what we say to each other, but what we do. We just need to become transparent. And I think about, like, there's people that are psychic, and there's people that are intuitive, and there's people that can feel different things. How is it we came to be so closed down and so private, for lack of a better word, when we're all one? I mean, we're all made of the same stuff. We're all the same stuff. We're all the same being, basically, just in individuated shapes and sizes. But we're all, and we all have that connection to be able to be, in the field that Rumi talks about, in that place where there is no right and wrong. Now, how did we get from there to where we are now, which is, a world of people with secrets?
Well, I need your opinion on this, Linda.
Okay.
Because one of my oldest and best friends was having an affair with a man, and at first they were both married, but at first they hid it, and then they eventually disclosed it, and she has 4 children, and they knew all about it. And I'm looking at it and thinking, right, you're playing with fire. I mean, what you're talking about, Linda, is, secrets, and everyone knows, and we're all one, and all that, right? And
Right.
I'm thinking, there's such a thing as discretion, and she was originally exercising it, even though everyone could see right through it. And once her children knew openly and all that, I was just thinking, what kind of future are they going to have? And of course it ended badly, because the man's wife got him back. And what amazed me is that my own daughter couldn't get enough bad things said about this woman. I was reserving judgment, because what my dad's always told me is, don't ever give anyone advice, because they leave you and not their habit,
Right.
So I was just keeping my mouth shut tight. But I wish you could see me gawking, like I was just beyond stunned. And I just didn't know what to do. What's your opinion of that?
I don't know. I think we get into these things where we're keeping secrets because we think that we're protecting people from getting hurt. And I just think it's something that society has created that it would take a lot to undo where we are now, and to become just transparent and honest and open, and it's like everybody has to do it. You can't have some people doing it and some people not, because then you've still got all of the mix up. So I think a lot of it comes down to, why are you having the affair? What's drawing you to go be with another person? Because we're not bonobo chimps at this point. We're not of the species where we give love freely to everyone. So, and then you just have to follow where your heart takes you, I think. And in their case, so the heart took them to finally disclosing it. And and then she loses him, and he goes back to his first wife.
Well, I don't know that I've ever seen anyone so excited about openly declaring how much fun the sex was. She had bags of, I don't know what the name of the store is, but, some sexy store.
Oh, Victorian Serenity, or Secret maybe, or
whatever.
Yeah. Or Fredericks of Hollywood.
Well, she was just declaring it. All she needed was a trumpet,
Mm-hmm.
It was about her sexuality. And I'm thinking, for God's sake, shut up, because I mean, we've all got those feelings, but you don't have to walk around with the bags. I mean, get it tattooed on your forehead, idiot. You know what I mean? And she basically told her children that. So that's in response to your question, is, why are you doing this?
Right.
And the idea is, I mean, I'll tell you what my opinion is. I mean, of course, you can guess. But the idea is to move your Kundalini up from the lower chakras to the higher ones, as we're discussing here. But don't go trumpeting the cause of the lower ones. Like, I'm sure their hearts were in it, or it wouldn't have lasted several years. But somehow the wife had a lasso, which was probably a few chakras above the lower ones. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That they had children together. She had children with her husband, but managed to, I don't know. But the idea is that it's lovely. I'm happy for the bonobo chimps, but I'd like to think that I've got, the ability to at least integrate the lower and the higher, and at least keep my bags hidden.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. And you just cracked me up there. I think one of the things is, you used the word discretion before, and
Yes.
I do think people should have a modicum of discretion. Call me judgmental, but I just
No, I would just say sanity is more like it than that.
yeah. Well, and you know, when you have somebody who, because I've met people just like the person you're talking about, where you just thought too much information, you know, and you just say, I get it. You don't have to paint the picture. Got it. And I think too that when you have children, you can be somewhat transparent, but your kids don't need to know everything about your personal life either. And I really think we need next week to finish discussing this chapter. And I think it's actually opened up a really interesting thing, and I'm going to end on this note, or if somebody wants to follow, they can. Linda, when you were talking about, you know, we're in a place in time where, you know, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and it's really hard to get it back in the tube. And because you were saying, you know, you've got these people that believe in the transparency, these people who don't, then you probably have a few in the middle. It's going to be hard to rectify, even though God would say there's nothing to rectify. Well, God might say there's something to rectify. But it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight where, you know, I mean, like, I was not shocked when my daughter got pregnant and she wasn't married, and I wasn't freaked out about it. I was more freaked out about her choice in the father. But so, whereas with my parents, you know, they were really focused on, let's not go get pregnant before you're married. And then when one of my sisters did get pregnant before she was married, I was just shocked that my mother was so understanding. But of course, you know the rest of that story. Now I know why she was understanding, because she had gone through the same thing. But I think it's a worthy discussion to talk about how can we, even if it's little baby steps, just get better about how we look at things, you know, and not be so judgmental. Okay, Linda's got to go. All right,
I can't be here next week, by the way. Sorry.
You what?
I won't be here next week. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'll miss you.
yeah,
Sarah.
we will definitely miss you.
You too, Shabana. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Love you all. Bye, Angela. Bye, Sarah. Bye, Shabana.
Bye, Nanette.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Love you guys.
Angela.
Bye.
Bye-bye.